Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be, whatever you may be doing. Hello, and welcome to Stories from the Soul. Today's conversation is one that has been a long time in the making. When the very first idea for this podcast came to me, the first name that surfaced as a guest was Honde Nyabereka. There was something about his story, his spirit, and his presence that I knew needed to be captured. Not just for today, but for generations to come. Honde's journey is one that carries the heartbeat of home in essence, and that's probably why it was the first name that came to me. It's essentially what this podcast is about, who it's for. Born and raised in Honde Valley, shaped by the values of family and tradition, he speaks of respect, integrity, stewardship, family, and hard work, not as abstract ideals, but as lived realities, etched into his upbringing and carried through into his professional life. From life in the village to decades in leadership at the bank, to the deep lessons of fatherhood and community, Honde's story is one of service, of humility, and ultimately of paying it forward. This episode isn't just about a career or a title. It is about the roots that ground us, the choices that shape us, and the legacy that outlives all of us. Legacy is not money in the bank. Legacy is a set of values that live on and transcend time. Honde's reflections remind us that success is never measured by your bank balance or your accolades. It is measured by how we touch lives, how our children remember us, how they view us when we're alive, how we empower others. And whether we leave the world just a little bit better than when we found it. So, grab a coffee, grab a tea, take a breath, lean in, join me for this heartfelt and soul-stirring conversation with Honde Nyabereka. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your time. And it's been a while getting to this place, both kind of in the short term and in the long term. I remember I've been wanting to do this podcast for, I don't know, probably about 2-3 years. 2 years. But when I originally thought about the idea, and I can't remember if I've told you this or not, the first name that came to mind for the guest was yourself. I don't know what it was, but it was.
Moved. Okay.
Now, I wanted to have you on because I just wanted to know the story. And this morning I was trying to remember, did we meet through BBA or was it through Safeguard? I don't remember.
I think it would have been through BBA.
Was it through BBA?
And then I got to know that you had Safeguard. And then, then in between, you then came into a role that was directly working with the role that I had at the bank. And then we started, all those conversations there. But
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's been a
But
while now.
that's many years ago.
It is. That's probably 10 years ago now. Probably.
Considering that you have been out of Zimbabwe for probably 10
Yeah.
years, I would say
I've
it's more than
yeah.
10 years.
No, I left in 2019. I left Safeguard 2018, so that is
Yeah,
7 years ago. Yeah,
yeah.
maybe 11 or 12. Jeez.
12. Yeah, I know. I know. You also be surprised it could easily be 15 years, you know. When we first actually started really talking and having those lunches, if you remember
Yeah,
us
yeah,
meeting
yeah, yeah, yeah,
at
yeah.
the then Mikos Hotel, and we would have
Yes.
those,
Our lunch, our
pub
lunch, our
lunches.
lunch interactions.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
did enjoy those, and I do miss them. That's the
yeah.
sad bit of kind of everything on this. But we'll get to the kind of the Zim story. But that's the bit of the sad bit. But
Yeah.
and again, it circles back to the origination of this podcast, and it was and we've spoken about it separately, but for me, I really want to provide a place and a platform for
Okay.
the diaspora, whether they're Zim diaspora
Mm.
or any diaspora who hears stories about home, quote unquote.
Yeah.
One might say almost their parents' home now, but don't really have a connection with it, don't really
Okay.
know the stories. And that's hence the name, Stories from the Soul, because
From the soul.
you know,
Oh, okay, okay. I get it.
there's a connection to that soulful home that sometimes people don't have
Yeah.
or don't get because they don't visit, or they just don't get told those stories by parents or grandparents who probably are maybe a bit older now and have come over and are living with them wherever they may be, the UK, the US, Australia, South Africa, but don't remember
Very true.
them when they were younger. And maybe
Yeah.
they don't remember the stories of when they were younger.
Very true.
So this is why we find ourselves here today. And, I'm really looking forward to this because I'm looking forward to getting a bit of a stronger sense of what Zim was like before. And,
Sure.
and, even kind of touching into the Rhodesia era, but we'll come to all of that. But the first question for me is, it's a simple one with some facets which will then follow on from there. And it's,
Okay.
when you think back to your early years, and we've interacted, and the influence of your parents, your father in particular, your family. What were the values that were planted in you that really still guide you today?
Yeah. No, thanks, Tariro. And as we were saying, we have spoken over the years, and probably there is the in-betweens that we never really got to talk about. But today I would really say, growing up as part of a wider, extended family, we always had, members of the extended family, around at our homestead. And this, in a way, taught me the importance, of family. You get to talk yourself about values. One of those values that I really look at is respect, and for everyone. And I feel that is important. But where would I have gotten that from? And I'll say to you, like from my parents, specifically my father, who would, go on to be addressing people who are young. I have said we always used to have, extended family, young and old at the homestead. And then addressing the younger, members of the family there, using their totems as an example. You would hear him say Shumba, Nzo, Nyati, calling out to those people. And that's a show of respect. How does that influence, what I end up being? It's really getting back to that. And when you look at that and you say, if it's a value, respect is an important one. Because I do believe that they respected him back. Yeah. So respect as a value would really be an important one for me. I think if I can go on to talk about also integrity, things that come from, you have talked about like my parents, family in general, that being that says trust and you will also be trusted. And I think that's really a key one again. If I look at things that we would talk about in terms of values. And I'm talking about probably me who grew up and in these early years, I'm in a rural setting, and that's where I'm hearing these things. I'm seeing these things happening. And then when you ask me, Tariro, to say what is, the importance, or influence that I would have gotten from family, that is it. I have one that I would like to talk about today, which is stewardship. Yeah. Things that probably we may think that's a word that you then get on to learn about or to talk about in your sort of working years. But for me, it's the drive to want to leave things better than you found them. My father's growing up, stories shaped what probably became of me. And allow me to go into this. Talking about my parents, they always strived to make sure, that there was food on the table. And when I talk about food on the table, it's not just for us, their kids. I talked about us having, extended family members being there, but it's food in abundance for everybody. We may have lacked, many other things, but food was always in abundance, and the food is life. We were happy without the other things, but we were a happy lot. I would say, working hard and paying attention to detail. And again, I talk to someone that I think, knows me quite well. It's a trait that I value and I live by to this day. It's looking back at what my father did, what he always, was for, why the kids have to be like this, why the people who are around him have to be like that. But to have things in abundance, you really have to be working for them and working hard. Something that you may not know, Tajiro, like my father used to be a carpenter and, constructing roofs for houses. At the age of 10, he would be taking me, to these sites there where he would now actually be showing me, no, do this, no, do that. And at that sort of young age, learning how to hold the hammer, how to make sure something is actually being put in a straight. But, it's a skill that up to this day, I do a lot of my own, handyman work at home. And it's not because I just decided one day, after finishing school, I'm at work and I do that. It's a trait, that I grew up with, that I was taught. So if you ask me, the full influence of my father, the family, the values that I got out of there, this is where I can really tell you that this is where I am, and owe it all to this upbringing that talks about family, that talks about values, that talks about hard work. So that's my earliest story, so to speak, if I can say.
Wonderful. Yeah. Now, just for those who may not know, Talk to us about totem. Explain for the listener what that means. Maybe not what the tin says, but what is it? What
Okay.
actually is meant when we say totem?
So totem this is me saying to you, gives you, and if I take this back to the village, it gives you identity. Your totem gives you identity. It gives you lineage. It says, where did you come from? Where are you now? And what are you actually passing on? You may hear people talk, maybe to this day, may not exactly be aligned, but someone would say that's kind of like a DNA. Because if you then follow that lineage, you now find that it's somebody who says, as I said, for example, I am a Shumba. That's my totem, lion. And when you meet someone who says they are also a Shumba, already you have got a relationship. Already that's where the start of that extended family comes in. And my probably, uncles or sekurus, where my mother comes from, they are elephant, or they are, nzo. And then that nzo bit, the moment you actually hear in the village that that's a nzo, immediately you link them up, as I say, lineage, the relationship. We have a link to yourselves because you've got this, because my mother is nzo. So that's what, if I take it to the village level, that's what it means. It gives you the identity. Oh, this one is Enzo. It's an uncle. It's a sekuru for me. I am a Shumba, and if I meet a Shumba, this must be a brother or an uncle, etc. So that's the thing. And like here, when I talked about respect, you will hear now that I'm saying, maybe my father, we may have someone from my mother's side who is staying with us, and my father is saying, "Nzo uyaipano," or "Nzo come here," and he's not calling them by their name. He's calling them by the totem. That's a show or a sign of respect. So absolutely vital. And you were asking me here if people are probably in the diaspora, are these sort of stories being talked about? Do the people actually call each other that? I'm quite happy to, also share that, I get into, as an example, into the UK and meet up with a lot of, the Zimbabwean diaspora that's there. But those ones who really know me, this is why I'm talking about identity, would immediately say, "Oh, Shumba, Makadi," if you know what I mean. Yeah. So I'm quite happy that it's not lost. Well, at least for this generation, it's not yet lost, because it's actually there. I get into whether I was in Sydney the other time, and I meet up with a guy that knew me from work. And he's actually calling, instead of saying Nyabereka or Wanda, he's actually saying Shumba. So immediately I would tell that has to be somebody from Zimbabwe who is calling me Shumba from across the road. So, those sort of things, Tarir.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And again, for the listeners out there, so the totem, is it always an animal?
In the context of, yes, it could be a bird. It's always an animal, as far as I'm concerned. It could be a bird, it could be fish, it could be something that lives in the water, something that flies, like birds, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So exactly, and it speaks to, I guess, culture. And linked to that culture is our values.
Absolutely.
And, culture, sometimes people have a certain response to it.
Yeah.
And I was about to say especially, but I won't say especially. I'll say, perhaps with those who haven't necessarily grown up with the connection to their, the easy word is the village, but I'll call it to their traditional
Yeah.
aspects and elements.
Sure.
And I mean, you've sort of touched on it in terms of totem, but as far as culture goes, you know, if I say to you culture, what comes up?
Well, I would say culture, taking it back to saying, if you talk about traditional things of tradition, is culture is ways of doing things. Yeah. And again, we talked about respect, we talked about integrity. It is about, what is our culture when we look at things like this? Are you acting with integrity? But that's what is the culture of this place? How do they do things? And I think it's quite key. You would have heard Tariro, that it's probably the thing that says, when in Rome, do what the Romans do. And more importantly for me, if you get to my village, and I come from the Honde Valley, right? There are certain things that the way, even when we greet people, right? We have got this way, of doing things, right? And even the way that we actually clap would probably be different. If I go, it could still be another Shona village or another Shona, setting. But when we get in there, we have a certain way that we actually clap. But when you get there, that's ways of doing things. You can't be going like I do, and I'm in my village, because the others have got their own sequencing of how they do it. So if I get back to culture, I'm just using these examples, but my, underlying word, or the underlying word or overarching word would be ways of doing things. That's culture.
And thank you. And, when you say culture and you talk about your early upbringing, I would imagine there were things and people that you saw that maybe raised some alarm bells. And I normally talk about them and describe them as light and shadow aspects, whether it's things that family members are doing, friends or people in the community. That kind of anchoring in culture and the values instilled in you by your parents about respect and integrity, I mean, how did that influence the way you grew up as an individual, as Wanda? When people weren't looking, when people weren't watching, and it was just you.
So that which I termed integrity, for me, is a key one. And I will say trust and being trusted. I'll give you this example of, you are at school, and yes, probably, you have had a misdemeanor, and then, you are punished. For us who went back during those days, yes, the schools were allowed to punish us, and you'd be punished, right? You get back home, and you don't tell your parents that I was punished, because obviously you've been punished, something that you did. So you don't tell them, right? And then for me, like when my father then would hear that, and I haven't told him, he doesn't ask me, I will also get reprimanded, at home for things that years that I have done at school. So you ask me that those things that you do, even when nobody's watching, would you do the right things? So it's now inculcated in you. What if somebody's watching? Because remember, my father is not talking to the teachers. He hasn't spoken to the teachers. He hasn't spoken to the headmaster. But somebody has said, if I may speak in Shona, asara ari kuchikoro ku punishment. We left him behind because he had the punishment to go through. Then my dad already knows that there must be something that he has done. Right? So when you get into those sort of situations, and my dad, this is the reaction that he has got. Why are you being naughty at school? And he's just taking, you get also probably caned for it. But what is it teaching me? I don't want anyone to go and say it for me. I'll immediately go and say it for myself. And guess what? I realized, Tahir, every time I went and reported myself, the punishment was not, there. Probably I'll just get, the ear being, pulled.
Twisted.
Right? Twisted, exactly. But what does that teach me? I would rather, even if nobody's watching, I would rather go there and do the right thing always. So if you get back to that and say, what has shaped me? I will look at that and say, getting into the many years of being, in the workplace that I've gone through. Definitely that's something that has shaped the way I've become. I'm not saying just in case no one is watching here, I will just do this. But I found it has liberated me because I know what I've done. It's in good faith. You may not like it, but I can explain myself why I got to that sort of situation. You had asked why that grounding coming out of, those early years. And it's for me the example that I gave you of me going through primary school and what all of us, we probably at one point would be, you have been naughty and this is what happens to you, and it gets to your parents and, they don't like it. They don't go and, inquire what did he do. But surely that adult would not be doing this if I had not done something wrong. That sort of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So I hear ownership, I hear accountability, and, these values which you've spoken about, and they feel like they planted the seed for how you've chosen to live, how you've chosen to serve. And I'd like to get a bit deeper into that part of the story, and kind of into how you feel and define success. So if we go and I'll ask, you've said that your kind of, can I use the word happiness or joy, comes from the experiences that you had growing up from your parents. And so today, what is it that drives that deep sense of service that I'm hearing in you?
So, Tariro, with everything, that I have said, and this mostly centers, around my parents, my family, is because, we always talk about Unekwa Wakava, this is where you came from. And I would say to you, my parents truly did. And I'm remembering one phrase that I've used, in my time at the bank, pay it forward. They truly did. The stories I heard about my parents, how they helped a lot of people, those stories tended to give me drive, to want to help other people and not to be expecting, anything in return. You underlined there to say, what is my definition of success? For me, it's looking at someone, if I am able to be able to help somebody that I see they don't have a roof over their head, and maybe I partake in making sure that they have. It's not about the probably bank balance that I have, but for me, success is there been a making of difference? in somebody else's life. But more importantly, that's why I talk about paying it forward and not expecting anything in return. To say, I'm helping here because somebody will do something for me, as well, tomorrow. And if I get on into detail with this, is where I would say, my hope is that those I would have helped, right, would also help others. And that's the whole essence of paying it forward. And I will get on to tell you, that, my parents, they grew up as orphans. And they were brought up by kind hearts. And still do not believe those people looked after them, thinking that one day these, little ones or youngsters that we are looking after will look after, us. And if I get back to my parents again, is looking at them. I've told you, in the earlier, discussion, that they welcomed everybody to come. That's why we always grew. We always had members of the extended family within our homestead. And that was them, in my view, not that I ever spoke to my mom or to my dad about this to say, now that I have got this concept of paying it forward, I think that's what they were doing. But no, but in my view, I saw them saying, we have had some kind of success in our lives. We have, as I said, food in abundance. We are blessed. We've got all this food. We have to share it. But in a way, it was that those people who looked after them, paying it forward and making sure that they, also my parents, are getting on to, let's also help others who are in need. Because we were, in my mind, them having the sense that we were also, actually also helped in there. And, having an attitude for me that says things can be better for a lot of us, just having that mindset, you being an agent for change, I think that's success. Now, allow me to say this again. I've heard people say you can have whatever amounts of money that you can have. But at the end of the day, when your time is up, yeah, it's just
Exactly.
your time is up. But how about once you are on that journey of getting there, to just try and be an agent for change for the better, for doing good for other people? For me,
Exactly.
I would still come back there, Terry, and say, that's success for me. You've made other people's lives much better. That's being successful. The bank balance at the end of the day doesn't matter. Once you're gone, you're gone. But as you were living, how have you made a difference in other people's lives? And yeah.
I remember my grandfather would always say, you can't take it with you.
Absolutely.
and I guess it kind of leads me into that question. Like, phrases and comments like that, just speaking for self, are the things that carry through with me. And in what you're saying, I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing a word which I believe is often misconceived or misunderstood or misrepresented. It's something. And that word is legacy. And all too often people associate legacy with wealth and stature and bank balances and business and whatever.
Yeah.
What is legacy for you?
So if you look at legacy, and it's the term, it's almost like probably people would think we have spoken about this, but we, as you know, we haven't. But that's a term that I always joke with my children, and we have this thing that says, and the legacy lives on. I call my son in the UK, and I'm talking to my son in Canada, in Vancouver, and he would say, "Hey, Baba, the legacy lives on." Okay, so you are asking me, for me, what is legacy? I will go back to all the things that I talked about. I'm talking about some people who looked after my dad. My dad looked after some people as well. And you will probably get to know that I looked after some people as well. And when I'm talking to my boys and I say to them, the legacy lives on, is the stories that we don't just say it just as a phrase. It's coming from somewhere, where my dad would be talking to my boys. I remember when he was, still with us, would be saying, this is where you need to come and lay me to rest when the time comes. But you must remember and understand that this will be your homestead. I've got this thing that says, my dad is saying, okay, whoever of you two boys, and they are little boys. I'm talking about my dad, when my boys were very, very young when he passed on. But during that time when he's talking to them, and he says, you see my house there, but in my particular bedroom with my wife, whoever gets married first, he has got the keys to that bedroom.
Yeah.
He's not talking about, you will go there. I've got fields. I've got, probably cows. I've got goats there. I've got chickens. And that's what he's talking about. But he's talking about, we need to continue with the things that got me to be where we are standing or sitting today. And that's the legacy that I'm leaving, for you. Legacy of ensuring. And you see, when I talk about, probably my children, you will find they've had a legacy of their grandfather looking after some people. They've gotten through a legacy of, when I was growing up, my kids were young. There was always used to be a lot of people at our house. And then I actually see it's getting into them as well. For me, that's a legacy that I'm also, leaving behind, to say they saw me being comfortable, or me and my wife being comfortable, having Sekuru and their grandmother having comfort, or comfortable, having people around them. Their father, myself, and their mother having, being comfortable, having people around us. And actually making sure that we are making a difference in other people's lives. So that's the one thing that I would say it's a legacy for me. It's not about, the big houses, the whatever that we live, but what's coming from the mind, what's coming from the heart. That's a better legacy, as far as I'm concerned, to leave behind.
And what story do you remember from your grandfather? Talking about legacy.
Sadly, myself, both, as I said, my both parents,
of course,
grew up as orphans. So the stories that I hear, unfortunately, like, for example, for my dad, his mom passing on when he was 4, and his dad passing on before his 7th, birthday. He even also struggles to actually remember them. So it was quite a difficult, moment. For my dad, yeah. So sadly, I don't have anything that I can, but I'm so happy that my children also had an opportunity to also interact with my parents, and as I say, them ending up, I always traveled. And, when my mom was not well, my girls were there. for her. Yeah.
And it was a natural being there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, you know, like you've said, where is it coming from? And I do believe it's coming from, you know, those days, the things that they would see them doing. And absolutely paying it forward, like I said. Not asking for it, but just happens because, you know, you have paid it forward.
And so, what else is there within the paying it forward? And from again, what I'm hearing, the service aspect of it. I mean, what else? Is there anything else that connects and influences that part of the story for you?
You know, yeah. Sometimes for me, and I'm a very strong believer in this thing that says, and we are blessed, and it's a term that me and my family, when I talk about now specifically myself and my wife, the children, you know, that I have, we talk about we are blessed. You will hear me probably later on, if we get to those conversations, talk about, you know, our travels, you know, around the world, to places that the kids would want to go to. But it's the term blessing that I put into it. You were asking about, you know, paying it forward. It's having, Tariro, a realization, right? If you have got that which you can try and trace your steps backwards, not just looking forward. Yeah. And again, I speak at least for myself. I probably would not be able to do all the things that I believe I've done and done well without actually looking back and saying, if that was a milestone that I reached, how did I get to that milestone? Then that informs the way I'm actually going, the way ahead for me. Is always looking back at the milestones that I have, whether I can call it achieved or I've passed. And then I come and say, how would I have gotten there? You will find, and probably it's all of us, that there are a lot of things, there are a lot of people who have, you know, played a part. Some of the parts, it's not that the person can even actually know that they have actually helped you achieve the things that you have achieved. And that's why when you ask me again about the phrase or term, pay it forward, why it's so important is because the good that I'm doing today, I'm very sure that person that I've done for, they are not doing it, paying directly, doing something for me directly. But in future, whether it's another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, they will do something good, because if they have got the way I look at things, looking at the milestone, how did you achieve that? Oh, it's because somebody held my hand. Somebody pulled me out of that difficult situation, right? And then I'm finding somebody here who has got also a situation that they are into. I'm not doing it to the person who pulled me out, but I'm actually doing it for somebody here some years later. And again, that is, you know, paying it forward, really, for me to come and just put another, you know, explanation or my understanding of that phrase.
So, you know, we've spoken about family, and connected to your concept about paying it forward, or what you speak about when you say paying it forward. Who in your past or even currently has helped you? And I don't mean a physical or a tangible help. Someone who has, perhaps unbeknownst to them, left a real mark on you. a teacher, a preacher, a colleague, who would you say?
Yeah, so, surprisingly, you will hear me talk about probably, you mentioned a teacher then. And going back to my very, younger years at primary school, we used to have this headmaster called Kabanguri. And you will be surprised that if you were talking to any one of my kids, they would know this name if you mention it. And it's because it's something that I talked about. He was the headmaster of our primary school, and he was also the one who used to take, grade ones when we came into school, to start school. Very interesting that, the sort of influence that I got from there is this thing about you now taking note of someone. And probably, I don't know, because I never got to speak to him, after that, but saying maybe this guy has got it in him. One day he's going to be, I consider myself successful. I said, he's going to be successful. The moment that really touched me is I was probably in grade 4. And then, it's one of those winter mornings where you find you just decide, I think it's better not to go to school. And what better excuse than wake up and say, I'm not feeling well, I'm very ill. So that one day, I'm not, one of those students who miss school. And on this one day, I'm trying to see if this works for me. I don't want to go to school. It's too cold, right? And then, I'm sitting there by the homestead, indeed, and it was built, sort of like on a small, hilltop, kind of. And it's
the
now
Honde
in the
Valley, when it's cold, is cold. For those who
It
don't
is
know.
very cold. It is very cold.
Yeah.
So then I see this form of a person that's coming from down there. And it's almost, they are coming towards our homestead. And I say, there's no one in the village who would be dressed like this with a jacket as well. That looks like the headmaster. Yeah? And then I quickly go and scramble to get, a rukukwe, a mat to go and sleep on and pretend to look very ill. And, like I had anticipated, I see, yes, he walks up. And I hear he's talking, got home, my mom was at home. And yeah, he's been here, he's not feeling well, he was like this. And he's coming and he's saying, yeah, because he never misses school. So when he missed school today, I had actually to come up and find out why he has missed school. Now I see, he's not well. I hope tomorrow he will be feeling better and he will come to school. That's really, for me, that's deep. He didn't do anything for me that says he's given me something, but he has given me that learning, not a learning of knowing how to do math or, geography or whatever, or any science. But that bit that says you recognize, that this student does not miss school. There has to be something that has happened. And I can tell you, if somebody was going to go to, to that primary school, until I probably then did my grade 6 or grade 7, at that school, I never missed a school day. But it came from somebody actually notices that this is your trait and there's a deviation. Guess what that does to me as well? In the workplace, it gives you that. Then I tend to want to have a look and notice people. This one is not happy today. This one does look like something is off and what have you. I see that happen 2-3 times. You call someone aside, into your office probably, and then you have a conversation. Someone who has worked with me, if they are ever going to listen to this, they will actually say, yes, we can relate, because that's something. But where is the genesis of this, Terry? As I'm telling you, the genesis of it is coming from this headmaster, Mr. Kabangure, who now says, because I noticed this. And then it gets there, that in my adult life as well, it's still there. Yeah? So, as you said, this is outside of, my family or my parents, my mom and my dad, who I've spoken about in this conversation extensively, but this is just someone coming from outside.
Yeah.
That has had that influence.
And it's important. And, I guess today, if we were to use modern terminology, it's called, people want to be seen. And they appreciate it when they are seen. They're not seen for the things that they do, but the things that they don't do. The things that are beneath the surface, I guess essentially who they truly are, that character of that person. And that is very important, in terms of, if I speak for self, in terms of leadership, of, leading people. And I say leading as opposed to managing. I guess for me, Wanda, just a bit of a transition is you have had professional success. We met when you were COO of Barclays Bank in Zimbabwe, and regardless of how you may see it, people will most definitely see and label that as success.
Okay.
What got you there?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. But really, that journey, and it's a story for another day, Tariro, that we could have one other very big, conversation around if we just send our own work alone. But to get to there, and my background is, or now was IT, and worked really, really hard. I went to sort of many places, and technology was technology. You didn't, manage it with the operation side of the actual business. But I got into being COO, which saw me take the responsibilities of IT and also the operation side. But what got me there, I would really say, was, the things that I did in the role that I had been given. When I was head of IT, I just, made sure that I tried to understand as much as possible what was happening in the business. Because I was now like in a role that says, I'm not going to be turning the nuts and bolts. I had people who were doing that. But who were we doing this for? And I think for me, that understanding of saying, we don't just wake up here and make sure the computers are working and we have done our work. But we are doing that because there are sort of, people who rely or depend on us making sure that, their delivery tools were up and running all the time. But what that did now is put me into the space where I wanted to understand a lot of what was happening in the business, because I can't deliver for them if I don't know, as an example, the business strategies that they had and what they were actually aiming to achieve. What other different things would we bring in the business? And they wouldn't know. They were very clear. They don't know the technology that enables, but they are very clear of the strategy that they have. So I would say bringing me up to COO was that sort of thing, then that other people then say, this is the person that probably who understands the delivery tools, but more importantly, he is now understanding the business, where it needs to go to. So the person who has got, sort of 2 feet in those spaces would be this person here, and they would, if I may, just for this once put, maybe use this term for myself, I would really say I believe it's work that I did well, I executed well. There are many, milestones, or achievements that we did as a business during my years in there. There would be people that you had asked me earlier on when I talked about my headmaster, but on the work front, there would be people like, the George Gomatangas of this world, who then was my, chief executive officer at the bank. And indeed, there were a lot of things, that you would say, the enablement that says, if people just say, in Zimbabwe, we've got this term that people say, you are the one who has got the baton stick on the own chimuti, you run with it. Just being given that space, to operate, and people having, like I talked right at the beginning about trust and being trusted. You trusting and also being trusted by other people. So that's what I would really say, without all the other nitty-gritties of learnings and what have you, to say that shaped the way, that went.
And what is your leadership style?
Yeah, well, I would call it a servant, leadership. Knowing and understanding that, you are in that space because there are people around you. But more importantly, that, you are there to lead a team that's delivering for others. As an example, you could be delivering, it's an internal, customer. It could be an external customer that you have to be there is always that element that says whatever all of us are doing internally, there is somebody who is benefiting from it outside. And yes, that's to just know that I'm there to be sure, that these guys have got the comforts that enable them to do their works, better. That's what I would probably consider myself.
And do you have a seminal moment, whether it was in education or whether it was in the working life, that really sticks out for you as significant? And I don't mean, you're now COO or anything like that. Just when I ask that question, what straight away comes to mind? What moment was that for you?
Oh, for me, it is where you say the buck stops here. That is a moment, and when I, by that, I'm trying to refer to, you have got things that have gone wrong in the workplace. And obviously, people are actually looking for fall guys and saying, somebody has to be, and as it has to fall. And on who is it falling? And then you've got moments that actually say the buck stops with me. This is about not that the thing happened when you were there, but the things happened, you are not there, but then you say, I'm the leader of this team. Who should take responsibility for this? Are there things that could have been done differently that could have stopped a certain thing from happening? And then I look at it and say, ultimately, I have to take responsibility. And more importantly, in this instance, I'm saying not on the highs. This is on the law. And you say the buck stops with me on a law. And again, I would not want to go probably into the exact, situation that caused for this. But when you come and you're actually talking to, as an example, talking to my wife, is not understanding it. Why am I having to do this? And this could actually see me get, be, if I could use the word, fired from work.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying it ends with me. It happened 3-4 levels down there. Why are you saying these guys at managers, they had this? And then I said, I'm the team leader. I'm the leader. I'm the one who has probably, if things had been done differently because I would have taken a certain action, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Yeah. I'm not talking about where somebody has dipped their hand in the till. No, that one there, I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about other, as I said, just a situation that I wouldn't refer to now. But because then, probably the parties who were involved in that would also, know. But it's that moment there that you say the buck stops here.
Yeah, and I hear servant leadership. I hear integrity. I hear the values which you've spoken about and we've heard today. And I guess, there's the question I want to kind of dig into now is, how have you taken, well, let's ask this first. Mm-hmm. From your journey, and what is it from your journey that you have really consistently anchored in on? You've told us a number of stories, but what is that one thing that, even in this situation when the buck stopped with you, what is that one thing that you've always fallen back on?
I think you have talked about integrity, there, that you do good, and always, as long as you are true to yourself, you're doing good, something will give, and people will get to know and understand you. We talked loosely there about, culture and stuff like that. But Tara, you have to go back to that and say, if you say this is our ways of doing things, and you say this is the way things are done in a nice way, that lead us to the good things that are happening. How do you, when you talk about falling back on things like that, it's when you then hit this mark and you say to yourself, I know this is right. This is the right thing to do. And I'm continuing. And, when, as you say, you go there and you give yourself up and say, the buck stops with me. But what is it that you are thinking is anchoring at the back? It's those sort of things, that the traits that you have seen, right? What you believe in, that would make a difference. And you actually look at it and say, this will definitely, be on my side. Not because you are lucky, but because you have got things that you believe are your pillars, are your anchors in the things that you need to do, going forward. So that's what I would really say, you're taking a specific action, but not just diving in wildly. You have looked back and as I said earlier on, you've got those sort of milestones that you have hit before. And how have you actually gotten there? So looking in the rearview mirror and always, looking at those sort of signposts, that's a key one there, because that informs you how things can happen, or how things have happened in the past. Yeah.
I hear that. And just lastly in this, kind of professional space, a professional mentor.
Yeah.
Who has that been for you?
Professional mentors have been, I would take, and I'm not too sure if you remember, there's a gentleman who was the COO in my very early years, and I'm talking about probably I'm in the bank, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. A gentleman by the name Mark Wood. The sort of person who would again have a look at what I'm doing, have the confidence to get, and I think in our conversations many years ago, I talked about all those travels that I did, all the sort of yes, I've gone out and I'm in this place in the world because I've gone to learn this, and I come back. I need hopefully to learn that, that sort of thing, to have somebody with the confidence. I talked about the headmaster earlier on. And here in the professional space, I'm talking about this gentleman who then has got the confidence to say, now you are the one, go and learn this thing, and I want you to come back and implement it. And I'm not talking about when now I was probably, in the, in executive management. No, I'm just, one of the guys, the field guys. But I'm given that task to say, go and learn this. And even at the time, before I even had a family, and it's almost like I'm talking to my parents, I've been asked to go, to this country here to do some work there. At some point, and in these travels, my mom is asking me, are you sure, isn't there anyone else who can do this work? Why are you always being asked to go to these other countries? But for me, it's people having that confidence to say, this guy is gonna, go there, and probably I have proven it that I can go there and actually come back and do this. But I think in leadership, it's those things as well that I have probably used as well. That you go there and you actually say, if somebody had, that eye to look at and actually identify me, and as far as I'm concerned, I did not disappoint. That's why over and over and over again, over the years, people had the confidence to say, okay, there's something that needs to be learned. Send this guy. There's somebody who needs help in the other countries. I went to quite a number of countries to actually help out with the work there. If there's someone who needs help, our guy to go to get these guys the help is this guy. Getting to be able to identify or, that skill. It's somebody having the confidence, but where did the confidence come from? Probably it's from the delivery that I did. Yes. And maybe the way I carried myself, there. But I give it to these guys because if they had not identified, I probably would not be in the space that I ended up being. But having that blessing that says, somebody is there, somebody is having a look. And I'll put it like this, Tadiro, where we also have spoken, in our past about who is that voice for you on the boardroom table. So that's key. If other people have been voices for you on that boardroom, because you are not represented there to tell your story, but you have got somebody who has identified you and they tell your story. And that story that they tell gives people confidence to say, this is our guy. Yeah?
Yeah.
So Mark Wood, for me, if you ask for a name there, long retired probably from the bank, but he was that one guy who did it for me, who made a difference, in my life, amongst many other people. I mentioned in my very later years, George, Guamatanga there, being that kind of a leader who I would probably call, it can be described by many in sort of many different ways, but a guy I would say had that sort of thing as well, servant leadership, I would say. Maybe if he was one day to write his story, probably that servant leadership will really come out as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And Wanda, you spoke about the places that you've been. Just give us some color. Where were you sent, and what were you typically sent to go and do?
Okay. I would start off with, maybe closer to home. In my very early years, was in Zambia. There is something that we used to call no passbook savings. And I went to a very old Masabuka, and I'm very sure it has changed now because I'm talking about probably some 30 years ago is when I was in Masabuka at a Barclays branch, trying to work with them on this. They needed that. I've been sent by Barclays to try and work with them on that program. And you come back, you helped actually have that implemented. You come back, you're implementing it in the country as well. Botswana, the very first networks that were actually put in, local area networks in their branches. I probably did 2-3 of those, having been sent there. I did a stint in the Bahamas in the year 2000 programs. We were doing a cooperative, work there across, the Barclays overseas countries. And I was there representing Africa. And I'm sure you would have heard the story that we were running the data center for the Africa, the Mediterranean, and the Indian Ocean islands. We were actually being run from Zimbabwe here. So I went there to represent, that grouping, spend a good 5-6 months, in that place. In the United Kingdom, I would not, probably finish off. That's where most of the learning was. I went to the UK. Most of my trips were, learning sort of trips, but probably I was in there, for many years. Every year I would probably be somewhere in pool and, learning things, getting to do things, coming back here, and hopefully, as I said earlier on, making a difference in the environment, in the delivery environment for the bank. So yeah, that's my story amongst many other countries that I managed to. But those, I think, for me, because of the activities that I had to do, they do stand out quite a lot.
And as you were speaking, there's something came to mind. And I'm presuming all of this was always with the bank, yes?
Always with the bank. When I say I actually left, the bank in 2020, it is, when I started doing the things that I do now. But all those years were with the bank.
And I guess, this is something which maybe the phrase is not necessarily appreciated as much these days, but I often hear about and see, on whatever platform it is, this person was in this role for 7 months, and then they went here for 9 months, and they were at this company for 2 years, and then they left this company, and they were like the what's the word I'd like to use here? The benefit that exists in being in a specific space or sector or company, I think is often overlooked, and one might even say perhaps forgotten. I don't know, in terms of what you are seeing, and whether it's how people are, what careers are looking like today.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd want to say around that in terms of, having the patience to stay in a single place?
Yeah. Okay. So probably if I talk about my specific situation, or what really drove me to be probably at the bank for the better part of my life. I would say, from what you have said, people moving from place to place is probably you are looking and seeking for something that you say, this is exactly what is at the back of my mind. This is what I want to do. I believe this is the road that will, get me to, to the destination, to where I want to be. You have got an aspiration, but what is it that takes you to that aspiration? But for me, Tariro, I think, and again, it is certainly a learning that I believe I've got. You asked me about, what actually drove me at that time to be able to stay in one place. I did a lot of different things, and I believe that it is probably, that constantly being challenged. Yeah, I wasn't doing like one thing. I'm very sure if probably I had been in the sort of line banking and be said, yeah, you're not gonna be a teller, and you be sitting here for all these years, I would have probably
Yeah.
been in the bank that long. But the
Yeah.
things that I did, and I'm telling you this, I get in there, and then I'm told, and during those years they used to use the term, it is IT management services. And then you are going there, you are doing work structures for people, you are working out if people, inputting this data or these checks at this rate, how many people would, a branch, as an example, need. So you're getting into the analytics of today probably, but you're actually doing that by doing work studies and stuff like that. You move quickly from there. You probably have got something that maybe many people would not know. Olivetti, a company, an Italian company, used to do machines called BCS 2030s. You quickly then get moved into that and say, they don't have in Swaziland, they don't have someone who really understands this. You are now their point man. You are now their go-to person. When they have a problem, they will call you, and you must help them fix this. It's those sort of things there. I've now moved. I was doing some work studies here, inputting them into here and saying, how many probably computers do we need to give? And I'll just pick a wild branch, not on branch. And when the bank used to have a branch there, how many computers will they need? How many checks do they have? How much is someone processing? An hour and what have you. So how many people do they need? Obviously, if they need so many people, they need so many computers, they need, that sort of thing. We're doing analytics of the time. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden you are moved, you are now going to actually be a support. Somebody steps into that role, you're getting there. Oh, no. Leave this here. We would like you now to go to Zambia, or want you to go to Botswana to do this. And you are there. You are actually starting to do something very different. So I would say mine one to actually say, I can try and link it up with the standard is, let's look at the people that were in here. And I like the fact that you talked about those people who were in that journey. Many that I haven't mentioned, but just because they can identify that this guy can do this, we have something that needs to be done, they can do it better. Maybe. And then they actually move you to there. So that causes now me to be saying, I know that I was in Kenya, 3 weeks ago, and I'm back home in Zimbabwe, but I don't know whether I will be here for a month, because I might be asked to go to Tanzania, go to the UK, go to this place. So that always being on the move, I would say influenced me, learning new things and not being bored, probably doing sort of routine things. I'm doing something very different that's challenging me all the time. I would say, Teddy.
Yeah, I hear that. And I guess for the managers out there, it's definitely a lesson to learn. And what I'm hearing, a word that I'm hearing here is seeing people for who they are, seeing people for their
Absolutely.
potential, and growth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Growth
Absolutely.
is what I would imagine anchors people.
Yeah.
you know, if they see there's a pathway to success for them. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Wanda, we could talk for days, but you know, in listening to you and hearing your story and the journey, there's not just humility, but there's pride in the way and the words that you use. And you know, you speak of those you've led and learned from. And let's kind of bring it home. And family, fulfillment.
Sure.
You know, what does it mean to you to raise a family? And to pass on what matters most, not just words, but you know, just tangible. What are real examples, things that you consciously, unconsciously do, and how do you show up for your wife, for your kids, for your family?
No, thanks, Tayo. I think if I look at the start of this, what you have, what it means, you know, to raise a family, and I would say to you, I understand the importance of family, and my parents demonstrated that. I talked about, you know, us, you know, being, you know, growing up, and always seeing, you know, members of the extended family really being there. I can tell you that, and again, anyone who probably listens to this in the future and they know me well, they would know that I actually started looking after a lot of people even before I started my own family. So you're a young man, you're actually starting out there and what have you. And as I told you, because I'm traveling quite a lot work-wise, there would be people who remain, you know, where I stayed at my home and I'm not there. Obviously, they need to be looked after. They need to eat. They need to do this. Had my young brothers as well coming up, you know, my sister, with my young sister was quite dear, you know, to me, coming in there. But if you ask me to raise a family, it's to look at what matters most to them. And when I say what matters most to them is looking to the future. And there I would say it's a good education for me. And what did that mean for my family? I think it meant striving to try and make sure that they go to the good schools. And there is a lot of whatever we can use to describe, you know, good schools. But I would say here, if you allow me to use the term that we are blessed, we managed to make sure that they went, you know, to the good schools. They had the good schools, managed to go to good universities. So for me, that's about raising a family. It's not about me living, as we were talking earlier on. It's not about trying to leave them with a huge loot and what have you, but it's to say these are the learnings that you have got, and that this can also, you know, make and shape your family. You are not being given; you are just being enabled. Yeah, we can go back to that. You know, are you giving a fish or you are giving a fishing rod? And in my view, on this one here, just giving them that sort of good education is, this is your fishing rod. Get out there into the mud and try and catch the fish.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I think having things in common, Tariro, and sharing passions. I talk about raising a family, it's quite key. I was saying to you earlier on, you know, traveling is one of my passions, and I share this with the family. We've gone to many places. One thing that I can tell you as well is that I would be at a place, and maybe in Singapore, whether I've gone there through work or otherwise, and then I say, you know, I've seen a couple of places here where my kids would be great to bring family here. I'm probably in the States and I'm in one of the places and say, if I get a chance, this is where I would want to bring them here. I'm in the UK and I can talk places, different places. So over the years, we have been able to do that. My son, as an example, the one who is in Canada, he probably the first time he went to Canada was when he was about 2 years old, when we were just going there on holiday. And then he fast forward, he sees himself, he is now attending UBC. So it's always, no, this is not my first time. I've been here. And we were just going there because it's, as I say, a shared passion that we have. Maybe I've tended to talk about places that entailed going, onto planes, kukwira ndege, so to speak. But there's plenty of places that we visited here in Zimbabwe. More importantly, when we go down into the valley, those places where my father used to talk about, my mom would talk about, we would want to walk in those woods, and talk. And I can narrate also those, sort of stories. So for me, that's to raise, a family. You probably also referred to, what is it, to love. And if I say to you, Tariro, you cannot do the things that I've mentioned, earlier in the conversation, and they've just mentioned as you started talking about family here. You can't be doing those things together as a family if there is no love. So for me, is to say, you share those passions because you've got an understanding and a love for each other. You're always together and you're traveling together because you've got that. And again, to the extended family, to all those that I stayed with, people that I put through school, it's purely out of love. I was talking to someone, the other day, they were just asking me about someone who had read about my profile somewhere and asking me, what are these things here that we hear being talked about, just going to places and just making sure that, you're taking people to school, you're doing this, and say, no. It's an understanding. Back to, if you identify and say, how do I make a difference in someone's life? How can I be that agent of change? That's purely what is driving. It's not because I would want someone to know one day that, you see those guys there, they were helped by so-and-so. If they actually don't know the better, who helped them? The better, really for me, because, it's not about having, ticks, in boxes, but it's really about what matters most. If I can say this to you, Tarira, and I would really say, for me, it's those things make me happy. Yes, there are people who then will be comfortable and it's great on what has happened to them, but they're actually making me happy because I've been able to make a difference. So I'm a happier person, overall. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that, Wanda.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to break from tradition. On the podcast, I traditionally ask a question which relates to the younger self. And given what you've spoken about and hearing the journey, it feels right to ask this question. Because the benefit that we have, and I'll anchor this story with the year, the benefit which we have in 2025 is that with where this podcast will go, it will be heard in 2025 and it'll still be heard in 2055.
Okay.
So the question that I have for you, and the final question for today, is there are words that you did not hear from your grandparents because of everything which we've spoken about. What do you want to say through the microphone today to your great-great-grandchildren who you won't know and will never have met you and potentially will only have a picture?
Sure.
What do you want to say to them?
I would really talk about striving to make a difference in the lives of the people who are around you. And when I talk about striving to make a difference, I'm using the word strive because it's not always you have listened to my story. I've talked to you, about being in the village, in the rural areas. I've talked to you about, my dad trying to make a difference, not because he was enabled in any kind of way, but in saying in the little that I have actually got, how do I strive to make a difference in the lives of the people around you? I've just told you here that, that satisfaction that comes to you to know that, I've been an agent of change. I have made a difference in somebody's life. So that's what I would want them to do. And this is not about money. This is not about wealth. This is just about you and what's in your heart and what's in your mind. And looking at things and saying, only if I can put food on the table, that's the first thing. We are surviving. And we strive to want to work for the other things that are to come. But there are things that are within your control. Strive to make sure that you are the best on those things that are under your control. And everything else, you work towards. But if it's within your control, strive to make sure that you can make a difference. And I'm very sure that every one of us has got something that we can do for the next person. Every one of us, irrespective of where you are, whether you are high up there, you are low down there, there is something that you can actually do. Just has to be in your mind, just has to be in your heart. I would also talk about stewardship. And this talks about striving, or again, to leave the environment wherever you are better than you found it. So the environment could be a work environment. When you move on to that new role, if I look at what I was talking about myself, the things that I did I leave people working better and moved on to some other place? Leave a legacy of things, going well? So striving to stewardship for me is a term that I would, or a word that I would use over and over again, because it talks about, again, making a difference. You're leaving the environment, wherever you are, workplace, at home, in the community, better than you found it. The next one would be, for me, a word that I'm thinking about now is empowering people. And when I talk about empowering people, is to live better. But Tariro, how do you get to live better if you are not empowered? So you have to start by that and saying, I have to empower people. It's either through education, it's either through recognizing, the skills that they have got, and saying, this person is sitting in this space. I can actually do better by taking them into that other space. And as I said to you, I saw other people actually, recognizing, all these skills, okay, that I had, and they made a difference in my life. They empowered me to do certain things by taking me to the places I've told you. That was empowerment. Go and do this. The rest was for me to do. They did not take me there and say, now we are doing it for you. But what is important on here when I talk about empowerment is about even also being chosen to be given that challenge. And once you have got that challenge, you have been empowered. Be successful with that empowerment and you will live better. Lastly, allow me, Tariro, to go back to my phrase, pay it forward. One good deed, and I mean it, absolutely from the bottom of my heart, will deserve another in some form, shape, and way. it will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanda. Thank you very much. That I know now why your name came to mind when I started this podcast. That has been such a rich journey. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for the experience. And thank you for the people that you have touched out there, helped, influenced, guided, mentored. Because, speaking for as one of them, to have role models and people who you can look to say, that's the way.
Sure.
Is very important. And I thank you for that. I thank you for everything that you've learnt and picked up on the way. And thank you for the person that you are, because it's definitely
thank you.
impactful. With that, Wanda, we'll say goodbye and we will see you again.
Absolutely. But thank you very much, Tyra, and thank you for having me, on Stories from the Soul. I look forward to listening to this podcast.
Thank
you say, hopefully it will inform and influence others into the future. Thank you.
Yeah. And the last thing, just as you were closing there, that made me think, it came to me and it was all for one, one for all, and God for us all. That is really one. Thanks, Wanda.
Yeah.
What a gift. What a gift of a conversation that was. Speaking with Wanda reminded me that some stories carry not just wisdom for today, but echoes that will travel far into the future. For me, there are 3 powerful takeaways that stood out, and I want to leave them with you. First, success is service. Wanda's definition of success is not about wealth, positions, or possessions, but about the difference you make in someone else's life. True fulfillment comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we give. Next, that legacy is lived daily. Legacy isn't a destination over the horizon. It's not something we leave behind only at the end of life. It is something we live in the everyday moments, how we treat people, how we carry forward family values, and how we nurture those around us. And lastly, as he continued to say, pay it forward. Perhaps this was the strongest thread in Wanda's story for me, his commitment to paying it forward. Every blessing we've received, every hand that lifted us, calls us to extend that same grace to others, knowing that the ripple we carry far beyond us. For me, seeing Wanda and hearing his story is a constant reminder that leadership is ultimately about stewardship. Serve to lead. Whether in our homes, our workplaces, or our communities, at school, we are all called to leave things better than we found them. That's legacy. That is impact. So to Wanda, thank you. Thank you for sharing not only your journey, but your heart. And to you, the listener, thank you for being with us today. My hope is that you take these lessons into your own life wherever you are and find ways to embody them in your story. This has been Stories from the Soul. So, until next time, stay grounded, stay present, and remember, your story too is a gift. And the way you live it may become someone else's blessing. Thank you.